So, welcome everyone. Glad you're all able to join us for this week's webinar. I know we've had a break of a couple weeks, so I'm glad you haven't forgotten about us and you've all been able to make it today. We've got a awesome presentation. Mariana from GetGround is joining us today and is going to tell us all about a tool they've built to improve their processes and workflow working between their data warehouse and Looker. Tool is called Optician, and I'm really, really excited to have her joining. I'm going to hand over to her in just a second. But if this is your first time joining us, my name's Dylan. I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Spectacles, and we run these webinars typically every other week. The goal is to bring the Looker community together and just talk about interesting things that the community are doing. Sometimes that's us Spectacles presenting, sometimes it's consulting firms, and sometimes it's kind of hands-on proper Looker practitioners like it is today. So you can register for our future webinars on our website, which is spectacles.dev. And if you're watching on YouTube or you're watching on LinkedIn today, they're also always live there. And so you can follow along and make sure you get registered there as well. And that is really all there is from me today. So I'm going to hand over to Mariana, who's going to both walk us through some slides, do a bit of a live demo. And then as you have questions, please drop them in the chat, either on YouTube or LinkedIn, wherever you're watching from. And we will try to get all of those answered at the end of the presentation. So Mariana, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Let me just check if I can control the slides. Okay, all good. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Dylan, for the invitation to be here today and to show you Optician. I've been attending these webinars in the past and they're really interesting. So it's also nice to be part of it. So first of all, let's just let me just present a bit, talk a bit about myself. So I'm Mariana, and I'm based in Lisbon, Portugal. And I've been working in the data field for about 7 years now. And currently, I'm working as the lead analytics engineer at GetGround. We are a very small team of only 2 people, and we service the bigger team of 90 people in the company. In my previous position, I've also worked in very small teams or even by myself. So automation has always been key to make things work. In my free time, I'm more of a tinkerer, and I like to do things with machines or with my hands, such as knitting or 3D printing. Okay, moving to Optician. So what is this? Optician is a Python package that generates Looker views from your data warehouse tables and pushes them to the Looker repo. There's extra features, so additionally, you can also customize some stuff in a config file that I'll show you later. And there's also a command to list which marks need to be synced. But this is more of an extra feature, so I'm leaving it out of this presentation. You can always check it in the README later. Okay, yeah. Just for some context, this is our data stack. We use dbt for data modeling, BigQuery as our data warehouse, and Looker for reporting. The problem that we were facing was that every time we had to change our tables, we had to manually write the corresponding Looker views with lots of back and forth during development. We had to manually update the field names, data types, descriptions, etc., which is a very dull, it was very dull work and very time consuming. There's a bit of a lag when switching the slides, sorry about that. My first attempt at solving this problem was to use a tool, which is dbt to Looker. And this is a Python package that was already developed by Lightdash. In summary, this package works by defining the Looker fields, both dimensions and measures, directly in the dbt YAML files. However, this didn't work quite well for us since it required to update the dbt repo in order to make changes in the LookML models. The YAML files will also get too crowded, which affected readability, and we found it hard to ensure that the YAML definitions would create a valid LookML view. So we've decided to build a tool decoupled from dbt. And that's how Optician was born. So instead of reading from the dbt configuration files, Optician reads directly the table schema in the data warehouse. So you can get all fields in the table, their descriptions, and their data types. And it generates a LookML view with all of your dimensions. After introducing Optician, this is what our improved data stack look like. There's just a small note that I want you to add. So in order to ensure that our BigQuery tables are documented, we make use of the persist docs in dbt, which pushes the fields descriptions to the tables in BigQuery. These will ensure that Optician has the right data to read and document in Looker. Additionally, and out of curiosity, we also use a few more tools to ensure that our models are consistent between dbt, BigQuery, and Looker. One of them is dbt checkpoint, and this is a package that ensures that the models and the documentation written in dbt is compatible with the tables generated in BigQuery. On the Looker side, we are using spectacles to ensure that the LookML models are compatible with the tables in BigQuery. Our experience so far with this improved data stack has been a very smooth development experience and easier change management. Okay. Optician is a non-opinionated tool, and it was inspired by this ideal LookML project structure that was proposed by Spectacles that I find relevant mentioning. In one of their blog posts, they propose organizing your Looker repo in 3 layers. The first one, the base layer, should contain only the dimensions as they exist in the data warehouse, and it can be machine generated. The second layer is a refinement of the base layer, and you would enrich the view by modifying the fields or adding measures. And the last layer is your explore, where you join across different views. Optician is responsible for creating this first layer that will always match your data warehouse marks. Any further changes that you need to make, you can add them manually to the standard layer in Looker. So in the case that you have a new field in your table, if it gets added to the base layer and you don't do anything else, it gets automatically passed through the following layers and it will show in your explorers. Okay, about some Optician features. Optician allows you to define some configurations in a config file. This is just a JSON file. And for example, you can tell it to assume and to infer given field names to be considered a primary key. So if your table has a field named ID, you can tell Optician, so if there's a field named ID, just mark it as a primary key. You can also ignore given field types or modes that are incompatible with Looker fields. For example, in our case of BigQuery, arrays. There's also the option to trim the suffixes in your timestamp field names. For example, if you have a field in your table named created at, it can be renamed to created. So your field would show us like created date in your Explorer. We can also choose to order the fields as they show in the generated view, either to be by alphabetical order or following the order of the fields in the table. There are some other configurations, but you can check them in the README later. I found these were the most relevant ones. Okay, moving to to the commands. Okay, so the main command of Optician is the generation of the LookML, so this generate LookML, and it can receive several arguments. So it can receive the database type that you're reading from. You can receive some additional database-specific parameters to specify the location of your data. In the case of BigQuery, these are the project and the dataset. You can pass it a file with a list of tables that you want to create the LookML views for, or alternatively, this could also be a string with a comma-separated table names. The override dataset ID gives you flexibility in terms of choosing the dataset environment to use for the LookML view. I'll show a practical example in a bit because it's a bit it's easier to explain. Finally, the output refers to the directory in your local machine where you want to write the views. There is also the push to looker command that pushes these generated lookml view files from your local machine to the looker repo and creates a new branch. For this, you need to pass a valid GitHub token as authentication, the name of your repo, the name of the new branch, and the name of the base branch. You also need to specify the input directory where the lookml views are and the output directory within your looker repo where you want to write the views. This command is optional, but it makes very easy to interact with the looker repo when developing. Okay, so I can move to a demonstration. So after showing the commands, I'm going to exemplify them in a demo. My goal is to show you a bit of the workflow as we use it. So I'm going to be focusing on the installation of Optician. So first, let me share our example of a DBT repo. Again, Optician is not tied up to DBT. I'm showing this as it is our workflow so that you can see how we interact with it. Okay. So we structure our repo in this way, following the good practices of staging, optionally intermediate, and marts. So our marts are the tables, are the models that usually I want to make as accessible in my data visualization tool. In this case, we have, for example, our customers table. I can also show you the configuration of Optician. So this is the file. I've saved it in here in the DBT repo, but you could save it anywhere you'd like. You just need to set up the correct path to it. Okay, as you can see, it's just a JSON file with all of the options that I've mentioned. For example, primary key columns, sub-column fields or modes, column types or modes to ignore. This is also the granularity of timeframes that we want to have in Looker, and so on and so forth. Okay. Let me also show you our DBT project where we define here some things in the marts. So for our marts, something that I prefer to do is to tag my marts with the lookml folder. Sorry, the lookml tag. By having this tag, you can use the list command from DBT to return you the names of the files and save them to a file. So it's just could be easier for you to list all of your marks in case you want to do, I don't know, a bulk load of all of your views to Looker. Other option that I've mentioned before, and it's here, it's this persist docs that allows me to sync the field descriptions from my marks to the table in the data warehouse. Let me just show you what it does. So for example, this is the table as I see it in the data warehouse. And as you can see, here are the field descriptions. Okay. Let me now show you the Looker projects. Okay, maybe I should make this bigger. I hope you can see it well. Okay, so as I've mentioned, we organize our Looker repo into these base, standard, and logical layers. And right now, in the base layer, we've already committed the files for customers, order items, and orders. This is our manifest file. And just to show you how we transition between environments. So we use this constant to define the data set. And right now, what we do is we have a data set for development and another for production. So while we are developing, we set the data set name to be the development one. And once we're finished with our changes before deploying to production, we change it to the prod one. And And this is important because I'm going to show you, this is tied up with the override dataset ID that I've mentioned before. Okay. Let me just show you an example of one of the base views. So this is my view. It was machine generated by Optician. If I scroll down, you can see that it only contains dimensions, no measures, no custom fields. So it's just a copy. It's exactly what exists in my data warehouse. Showing you the refined view. So this is a Looker refinement. And what I've done here is I've edited some things that I wanted to change, and I've added more fields. So in this case, what I've done is I've relabeled this field ID to be labeled customer ID. And I've added a measure of customers count. As Explore, I've created just this simple join of orders with customers. And let me just show you how this looks like. So if I go here to my, not sure if this is big enough. Okay, if I show you here, what happens is that in here, you can see that my ID field was already renamed to customer ID. And I can also see the customers count. So I can see everything that I have in my base layer, plus all of the changes, all the modifications that I've made in my standard layer. Okay, so this just to give you some context of how we organize our repos. Let's now just say that I have a new field in my model that I want to bring to Looker. So I'm going to have to create it in my model in here. So let's say that I want to create a field that would be a categorization of a customer into new or returning customer. So this is my new field. I'll also add the description of the field to my YAML model to ensure that, the field description will be available in the table. So I've added it here. So right now what I need to do is build this model so that this table gets refreshed in my data warehouse. Let's pray to the demo gods that my commands run okay. Okay, great. And now what I want to do is sync this model to Looker. And how do I do this? The way that I prefer to do it is I would have a file here. And in this file, I'm going to edit it with the names of the models that I want to update. So in this case, I have this file here. I just named it diff, can be anything else. And I've added customers, meaning that I want to update this model. Okay. Now, what we need to do is to run this Optician command. Okay, just let me show you what this does. So I'm going to run this command. My data warehouse is BigQuery. The name of my project is stored in an environment variable. My data set is this one, where it's going to read from. My tables are saved in this file here. And now I think it's a bit more clear, the use of these parameters. So what I'm doing here is I'm giving it the name of the constant that I've defined in Looker. So this one. So what's going to make is that in my base file, it's going to make a reference to this constant, and Looker automatically adapts using this constant. So in this case, if I'm in development, I'm going to be reading from this data set. If I deploy to production, Looker already know. And I'm going to write this view, in this case, just one, to this directory, which is here in my dbt repo. Can be anywhere else. Let me just run this command. Okay, the lookml view was written. It created a directory in here. Let me just show you. So this is what has been generated. And here it is, the customer type. So looks good. So now what I need to do is to push this view to the Looker repo. So for that, I'm going to use the push to Looker command. And again, this is my token that is saved in an environment variable. This is the name of my repo. The branch I'm going to write to, it's called demo. So it's here. The name of my base branch is master. The input directory is this one. So this is where my lookml files are in my local machine. And the output directory is this one, which is the name of this folder in here. Okay, so if I run this command, I'm expecting it to connect to my repo and to push. Okay, it says the branch already existed. If it did not exist, it will create a new one. And the file has been updated. If the file has no changes, it will just tell me that it didn't do anything. So if I refresh in here, Looker should tell me there have been some changes that I need to pull. Exactly. And if I check my file, here it is, the customer type. And if I don't want to do anything else with that field, what's going to happen is that it's going to show in here. Yeah, automatically. So I could add to my visualization, for example. And here it is. Okay. So this is our workflow. Overall, something else that I can share with you that we do. So instead of writing all of these commands with all of these arguments every time, since these arguments are always the same, so we're always reading from the same dev data set, we're also using the same project. If you're always storing the tables in the same file, this can be wrapped in a function. Right now, what we do is we wrap this commands in a function in our shell files. And what happens is that then you just need to write create lookml, and it creates everything that is in this diff model, and commit lookml will do the same and push it to Looker. So it's just an easier way for us to automate and to facilitate our development. Okay, I guess that's what I wanted to share with you. Maybe now some time for questions.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Let me make sure I've got the right view here. There we go. For those watching, if you have questions, if you're on YouTube or LinkedIn, please feel to write them there. We will answer them as they come through. Mariana, thank you very much for that. That was really interesting to see. Just like awesome to see, someone. We at Spectacles had a problem with Looker. We went and wrote our own Python package, and that was kind of the beginning of a whole company for us. So it's really cool to see other people doing similar things. We'll wait for questions from members of the audience, but I actually had a bunch that I wanted to ask after seeing the presentation. The first is, it sounds like most of this workflow happens locally today. Is that right? Like, you're not running Optician in CI, you're doing your DBT work, you're running the command yourself. And I guess, was there any desire to move it to CI to, have DBT CI generate the schema and then to auto create a PR? Because I guess there's a world where you could do some of this in an automated way, where if Spectacles passes on the Looker side, you could, auto merge these things. Kind of what was your thinking? I know you're a team of two, so obviously some of this is just like, it's probably easier as two people to just do it locally.
Yeah, in our case, it's easier for us to run it locally because we work in parallel in DBT and in Looker. So when we're, for example, onboarding a new table, I start writing the model in DBT. I'll push it to Looker, I start to see the changes, and it helps me understand, okay, so maybe I needed fields to report on this specific stuff, and I go back to DBT. So there's a lot of this back and forth during development. So we always do it this way.
Okay, that makes sense. And some of these are bigger questions, some of these are smaller questions. If you delete a table in DBT or delete a model in DBT that deletes a table in BigQuery, does Optician take care of that if you run the command, or is that something that requires kind of
Good point.
manual intervention?
Yeah, that needs manual intervention. So you need to delete the views in Looker, and I don't know, check your dependencies of all of the explorers that are using that view. So yeah, that demands manual intervention.
Cool, that makes sense. You mentioned that you use DBT Checkpoint to verify some things on the DBT side. It's been a while since I've been super involved in kind of like DBT development. Were there any other DBT packages that you considered using as part of your setup, but ultimately decided not to?
Oh, there's a lot of packages we, we use. I've mentioned this one because I found it the most relevant for the context of
Okay.
Optician. We used pre-commit. So before committing anything to
Yeah.
DBT, we run a set of tests. So let me just check. So we use the packages that most people use, like DBT utils or DBT date or CodeGen to help generate the code for the views, things like this. But then in pre-commit, we run, let me just open here. We run SQL Fluff to lint our SQL models. We also run YAML lint to lint the YAML models.
Yeah.
DBT checkpoint. DBT checkpoint is one of the others. So it checks for example, if my marks have a description for all of the fields. So for me to make sure that the tables have descriptions. It checks if the columns that I've defined in my YAML marks match the same columns that exist in the table. So if there's incompatibility, it's going to warn me. What else? Yeah, it mostly checks for documentation or schema changes between DBT and BigQuery.
Okay, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that people often, for a lot of people who use Looker, they're not native Python developers. They're often people who are very comfortable with SQL. They're obviously comfortable with LookML, but Python feels like a stretch to them. But something often they may want to learn so that they can build something like this. Do you write Python as part of your day-to-day work? Was this kind of the first major project, or is it something that you've used a lot in the past?
Yeah, so I've used Python in the past, I think since my first job.
Okay.
I've worked as data analyst and kind of data engineering, so I've done a bit of everything, and especially in my previous position, I was taking care of everything. So I've done a lot of Python. At this position, we set up some pipelines with Python.
Okay.
Because usually we have a loader, we have a data loader tool. We are using Airbyte, for example, could be any other. But we also have some custom pipelines with Python. So it's something that I use once in a while.
Okay, that makes sense. And so Optician today works just with BigQuery, right?
Yes, good point.
Yeah.
I've had a slide that I did not show about feature work. So right now, Optician works only with BigQuery. That's the way that I've defined it. But it was built in a way that it can be extended to any other data warehouse. So I invite everyone, if you have Snowflake, Redshift, whatever, if you want to fork our repo and open a PR, let us know. I think it would be really nice to extend this to other data warehouses. So feel free. This is open source.
Cool. Awesome. And then final one for me was, there's obviously, it's a reasonably broad project. You have to infer things from BigQuery. You need to be able to write LookML code. Were there any bits of it that were particularly complex, like anything you ran into as you were writing it that took more time than you thought, or any complexity around the development?
Around the development of Optician?
Of Optician.
Yeah. Let me try to remember. I think in the beginning, I've come to the conclusion. So I need this option. I need that other option. So that's why I've created that configuration file with all of the things that I thought about would be useful to tweak. For example, in the view, the time frames that show for the dimension groups for dates.
Yeah.
That's something that I wanted to be able for people to decide which ones they wanted to use. So yeah, I think the configuration file was the way that I found to make all of these tweaks. The most complex thing, so this started like as a Python script, a really simple thing. Then we started to make it a bit more modular, create classes for the things, for in Python, and yeah, I think abstracting a bit the code so that it could be extensible for another data warehouse type, or even right now it's built for GitHub, but it could also be built for another similar tool. And then I think the hardest part was the packaging of it. That part was mainly done by another colleague that I had at the time. Then I finalized it, but I think that was the trickiest part. It's like I've never done a package before.
Yeah.
Just getting to know how PyPy works and everything. I think that was maybe the most challenging part.
That's cool. And then actually I said it was the final one, but I have one more. Did you guys roll out, I think everyone does this slightly differently, and so I'm always interested in how people have done it. Obviously, you're generating LookML as part of the project. Did you roll out your own thing to write those LookML to print dimensions and things like that, or did you use anything that kind of pre-existed, either that Looker released or anything like that?
Before using Optician?
No, so for the, like when in Optician, when you're writing the LookML itself, when you're generating dimensions, did you guys write all your own logic to create the views and create the dimensions and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I took a lot of inspiration from DBT to Looker, obviously, but I think their code was a bit more complex. I think it was, maybe it was tested or something. Mine is not. But yeah, I took a bit of inspiration from there, but I've built the logic myself. Yeah, to create to parse the table into a LookML file.
Okay, that makes sense. Anything else that we haven't asked that you wanted to bring up about the project that before we head off today?
I don't think so. Yeah, just an invite to everyone if you want to contribute to this, or if you have any questions for it. If you have, if you want to discuss anything, feel free to ping me. I'm in the DBT Slack and on the Spectacle Slack workspaces, so feel free to ping me.
Awesome. Well, Mariana, thank you very much, both for creating the tool. It's really cool to see people building stuff on top of Looker. We at Spectacles really enjoy seeing it. And thank you for joining us today. I can just tell from the comments that people have really enjoyed seeing the tool. So thank you very much. I'm sure we'll have you on again sometime soon in the future. And to everyone who's in the comments and who's been following along, thank you for joining as well. I really appreciate